The Batman has officially had its release on Rotten Tomatoes, and it seems like it's getting a pretty high certified score from Batman fans and also professional critics. But of course, like always when I do with this series, we're gonna go ahead and see why some people would say that they don't think the film is that great. So far, it has an 87% on the tomato meter and has 161 reviews out. But there's also the critics' consensus that says, a grim, gritty, and gripping super noir. The Batman ranks among the Dark Knight's bleakest and most thrillingly ambitious live-action outings. Also, if you're wondering why I'm a little stuffy, it's because I have a cold. So far, there are 140 fresh reviews, but there are 21 rotten reviews. And today we're going to be looking at those 21 rotten reviews. Also, a reminder about how this show works. These are the few things I want you to know. One, I don't look at the in-depth reviews. I kind of look at the brief descriptions that are on Rotten Tomatoes most of the time. The other thing is, I don't look at every single negative review that's on the website because sometimes they say the exact same thing. I'm always curious to see if they have something different to say, but if it is repeating the exact same problems that other critics have had before, then I'm not really going to talk about it that much. And the last thing that I want to tell you guys is that during the next 2 days, I'm not going to be able to see the movie yet because it hasn't been released just yet. I'm only reviewing the Rotten Tomato reviews, but at the very end, I will see the movie and see if I agree with the negative reviews or not, or if I'm going to jump on the bandwagon with the positive side and actually agree with the critics. If the reviews are still going to be the exact same as they were the last time I did talk about them, then I'm not really going to look at any more negative reviews. I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys my thoughts on the film. Now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually dive into what some of these negative reviews are saying. Performances were emotional and raw in The Batman, but you're going to get a very broody Batman that never smiles. The Batman is not kid-friendly for younger ones. Reeves is aiming for a film noir-like Batman story, but the Dark Knight, supposedly the world's greatest detective, does very little detecting of his own, mostly relying on others to unearth clues and pass them on to him. The Batman emerges from a movie universe now becoming ubiquitous, where a phony funeral worldview is the only thing that can comfort death. I wish they had taken the time to develop Bruce as a real person with feelings and emotions. Even in a dark and brooding film noir, there still should be moments where the characters breathe and connect. The Batman certainly mirrors the dismal state of the world today. Any breaks from the dreariness will have to come at a different Bat time on a different Bat channel. So from the few reviews that I've read, some are saying that they don't like it because it's too dark and it's not really for kids, while this is a DC film, and it does push the boundaries on the PG-13 limit. Now, for the character of Batman, it should be within its nature to be a dark film, because the stories that are being adapted from the perspective of Batman makes sense to have a dreariness and sense of misery within this character. All of the Batman films have had that kind of ideology. Now, maybe the PG-13 limit, where people are saying this is pushing the boundaries too far and I can't let my kids see this, well, that's kind of the point with these movies. You have Batman films that have been in the PG rating, and kids have been seeing the films and comic books where they push those boundaries and are still okay with watching that. Now, for parental guidance, if you don't necessarily like your kids watching that, then okay, I can't really control what your parenting skills are. But I'm just saying this is exactly the type of nature that a Batman film should actually be. A more funny and kooky one-liner type of Batman is not my kind of fun for a Batman film. The other thing that I'm seeing here is that the Batman is actually not really being shown that much to his full potential, or isn't really being focused on the forefront. There are other side characters that are getting a lot more screen time than Batman does, and that tends to be an ongoing thing within Batman films, to be honest, or Batman content, because most of the time they usually focus on the villains and then Batman comes in and then it's his reaction towards those villains. And for me, that doesn't really become bothersome because there is a subtle way of you being able to understand personification of who Batman is, of what kind of a character he's like. You can be able to pick that out as, say, this is just style over substance and you really need some more substance, but you can still be able to find some amount of substance within that style though. And that would depend if that movie can actually work for me. Now, if I do end up agreeing with these people and say, I feel like the visual representation could have been utilized a lot better rather than just having Batman on screen and just have the villains or the side characters take over the show. But to be honest, I'm kind of used to that being a thing within the Batman universe, so I don't know if that's really going to be a problem for me. The reality is that there is probably nothing truly novel to be done with Batman at this point. Try as Reeves and his co-screenwriter Peter Craig might, they can't squeeze much higher meaning blood out of a fatally depleted stone. The riddles of the Riddler with their dime store greeting card histrionics are about as frightening as a frown drawn on a detached baby doll head. Truly cornball stuff. Within the confines of its PG-13 rating, the Batman is much more unnerving than previous Batman installments. The trouble is grafting a softer pastiche, I don't know what that word is, onto a superhero-based code can sometimes feel more exhausting than rewarding. Imagine if David Fincher made a Batman movie, but it was censored to air on televisions at Walmart. Batman nearly dissolves into the night, overwhelmed by acquiescence to his film's own Norrish ambitions. Now, this is more so talking about the dark side of Batman, and a lot of them are saying that they're wanting to see more darkness and that the PG-13 is holding it back. I find it weird that this person decided to say that the Riddler is pretty much being corny and is not at all frightening. That's a little odd because he definitely looks frightening, at least that's what I saw when I watched the trailers. Now again, I personally don't mind this film being PG-13 because you can push boundaries on how intense and how brutal you can make a Batman film even with this MPAA rating. Now I guess a lot of people are asking for a rated R Batman movie because they really want to see Batman push those limits, but to be honest, I don't really see why we necessarily need to do that. You can still get that exact amount of emotional depth that's filled with torment, heartbreak, and despair that's just as scary within that PG-13 realm. Depressing, dark, and endless, I don't know about you, but this particular time in history does not seem like the moment for a movie that will leave you A, miserable, and B, wondering why nobody in Gotham City seems to have heard of light bulbs. There's an unshakable feeling here of what's the point, not to mention the nearly 3-hour length, holy runtime. It's a movie of alternatively promising and frustrating half measures in which Reeves' shrewd storytelling instincts and the usual franchise filmmaking imperatives repeatedly fight to a draw. If dark, rain-soaked superhero flick sounds done to death, this latest Batman may not be for you. Now, the runtime can make sense because this is a 3-hour film and this movie looks like it's going more for a personal journey for Batman's character, and what I'm seeing in the negative reviews is that some of them are saying that we're not really focusing a lot on Batman, we're focusing more on the other characters. Now again, that depends on how well utilized it is, because Batman content can usually go towards places like that and can still manage to work. But for a movie that is definitely 3 hours long and we're not really spending a lot of time with Batman or we're getting to know Batman that much, and the moments when we do get to spend time with Batman, it would probably only focusing on things that are not really important or quintessential towards the story, then yeah, that could be a little bit of a problem when watching it, but again, I don't know how the movie is. There could be a way for the runtime to be seamless if you are interested within the psychological analysis with the character of Batman. And that's why I don't really get this other comment talking about why, oh, we see another superhero film and that's not really saying much. I mean, just go ahead and skip it. Why? Superhero films can bring in a lot of depth-defying storytelling. Have you seen the movie Joker? That's a psychological analysis of a character that I really like seeing. And I think that this film really wanted to take in a dark route and bring in something where you can't be able to think, then yeah, make more superhero films like this. I'm all for it. Robert Pattinson is a perfect fit for the cowl, but this bloated effort lacks focus. The Batman is frustratingly safe. A movie full of potential for more and settling for less. It preaches to the choir, reinforcing the same ideas trodden over and over again across 5 movies. The Batman features terrible pacing, a much too long runtime, a story that seems to think it's being original while it isn't, and a combination of a score and cinematography that leads to an uncomfortable viewing experience. A less gripping redo of previous Batman films and television shows with a lethargic pace that drains the film and tension of suspense. So the last few bit of reviews are saying one thing that's pretty crystal clear. It's the same thing that you've been able to see with other Batman films, and it's not really bringing in anything that new. Now, I get it that with an origin story or like a Batman film, you do have to repeat the exact same type of plot over and over again, and maybe that would be tiresome for some people. If you're not necessarily that excited to see, like, why Batman is the way that he is, and seeing him face off against other characters, and having to deal with the exact same type of thematic messages that have been placed within a lot of other Batman films about redemption, regret, darkness, light, hope, then maybe this film would probably not work for you that much. But if you aren't really a bothersome towards the story and you want to see it being taken into something that would feel like it could be fresh, then maybe this film probably wouldn't be that bad. But again, I don't know. I haven't seen the film yet. Okay, so that wraps up for day one with all of the negative reviews. A lot of them have been bringing in some interesting insights. Some of them I definitely don't agree with, but others I probably get what they're talking about. But let's see if they're saying the exact same thing on day two, or if they have something a lot more interesting to say. So we're going to go ahead and skip over towards day two of rating negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Alright, I am back. It's day two. We're gonna go ahead and look at some more negative reviews. We now have 222 reviews so far on Rotten Tomatoes, and it went down 1 more percent. It's now at an 86. There aren't that many more rotten reviews. I think the last time we were on the site it was like 20 or 21. So I think there's like either 9 extra rotten reviews. So this isn't probably going to take that long, but let's go ahead and take a look at what they say. Again, so much of this is about shock value rather than anything actually scary, since the Batman is handcuffed by its family-friendly PG rating, the result being something like a Saw movie made for Disney+. It's rather highly polished and extremely well-directed mainstream affair, but the ideas that Reeves infuses his film with substance, so to speak, is familiar and feels almost artificial. Yet another lubricous, laboriously grim slog massacring as a fun comic book movie. The most artistic Batman movie ever made, Pattinson leaves this mark on Bat legacy as a broken Bruce Wayne, but this is another case of a director's ambition getting in the way of his own work, demanding so much patience without actual payoff. The Batman is quite simply a ponderous bore. So far with what I'm seeing right now, it looks like that they're just saying the exact same things as the reviews that I have actually talked about before, that the movie should have pushed the limit of being a rated R film, and instead it's being held back by the PG-13 rating, while others are saying that this film is being quite a bore and a slog and isn't necessarily much of a fun comic book film. It's really odd seeing like these two differing sides where somebody is getting bored because it's being dark while another one says that it's not being dark enough. I think that if you're wanting to see a fun comic book movie and not something as dark as, say, like Batman, you probably need to go and watch, say, Thor Ragnarok. You'll have a lot of fun with that one, because that's a movie where it would like to just tell jokes all the time. And if you're wanting to see a movie that can challenge on how to be dark without its limits, go watch Joker or Logan, because they push the limits on what you could do with these characters in a rated R movie. The Batman is a needless collage of not only better movies, but more egregiously of better Batman movies, as director/co-writer Matt Reeves and co-writer Peter Gregg create an utterly inferior and infuriating vision of the Dark Knight. Underlit and overblown is a formidable combination, though not necessarily in the way Reeves intends. Puts the Batman characters into a forgettable B- serial killer thriller, one with a needlessly convoluted plot, too many characters, unconvincing twist, and a terrible villain. The Batman is an okay film that thinks it's excellent. It's also so inspired by Fincher's 2 exceptional pictures about serial killers that I'm surprised it didn't call itself the Bat 7 Man. Okay, so really quick, one of the comments that one of the critics has said, talking about how there's too many things going on and too many villains and a lot of stuff that just doesn't make any sense, and a villain that's actually pretty bad. I haven't gotten this much information from other critics that explain why the movie was not that good or that well executed, except for one thing where they talked about how Paul Dano as the villain is not necessarily that great either. Then again, I'm not sure if this is the villain that this person is talking about, but it seems like that we're getting somewhat of a connection about how Paul Dano is not necessarily that great in the film. So this is all a subjective or preference thing, so I'm not sure if that's going to be the way that I will be able to think about it when I watch the movie, but again, this is interesting to figure out. And I would understand where a lot of things would be happening that you're just confused as to why you're watching the film and what's going on here, and a lot of other things that would be happening in the movie. But here's what can make the movie work. If it's all consistent with all of these different characters that just so happen to be in the movie, and it ties cohesively within the narrative, then I would say that is perfectly fine. But if these different characters have different types of messages with different things going on within their lives that isn't consistent and isn't coherent, then that makes sense, and the film would be in a lot of trouble. And as for the other comments, it looks like that these critics are upset because they have watched other movies that have this type of subject that the Batman has done, and they figure that those are a lot more better than what this one is trying to do. And recognizing other movies that have this type of story and do it better, it makes sense why it would be tiresome to rewatch that kind of story over again and would say, this film has done it better. The question that I would like to ask is, if those movies didn't exist and we only had the Batman, couldn't this movie still be counted as good? And I would say it depends on its execution. And that's basically it. Some of the reviews are kind of saying the exact same thing as the reviews that I've looked at before. But yeah, that's kind of it for the negative reviews so far. So let's go ahead and skip over towards the day where I've seen the movie in the theaters and I give you guys my fresh take on it.
So I just got done watching The Batman for the very first time. And what are my thoughts on it? I really like it, but it does have some flaws in it.
Now, are these flaws in any way or shape related to what I saw with the negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes? A couple of them are. I think for one, this movie and how it's trying to portray the character of Batman, it's a little different. And I like some of the different things that it was doing for this film, but at other times, in terms of creating a really strong and conflicting character of how we usually see the character of Bruce Wayne in Batman, this one didn't really utilize it as strong as it could have. There's a really cool way on how they're trying to make Batman reflect on the character of Bruce Wayne, but I don't know if they did as much as they could with it. I felt like they could have done a little more. Maybe the film did all that it could because this is a 3-hour film and there was a lot that this film was trying to do that I wanted to pay attention about, but I need to get a second watch in order for me to verify what they did for Bruce Wayne and Batman is justified. The other problem that I sort of had was Paul Dano as the Riddler. There were moments where he was hamming it up, and he was kind of acting annoying. And at some points, it looks like he knew what he was doing with the character, but at other times, he went too far to the point where it didn't really feel subtle at all. Now, the last criticism that I had was Selena Kyle, aka Catwoman. I liked her in the movie. I liked the actress that portrayed her. I think she was pretty good. There's usually this battle between her and Batman that makes them both attractive and have a good connection within their romance, but what also makes them really good enemies. In this one, they do put her in a different position than the usual Batman films do, but in terms of them having actual chemistry and romance, it feels really lackluster. Maybe on second rewatch, there's something in here that I'm missing, but I don't know. I didn't really get it on the first go. Now, as for everything else, the action, the atmosphere, Pattinson, Jeffrey Wright, like the rest of the cast, love it. Loved a lot of what they did in here. They did a lot of what I wanted to see from the trailers. They did so much that feels really good and authentic. I love the grittiness. I love that this feels like a raw and authentic Gotham City. This one really hams down on the film noir-esque style of Batman. I really wanted to see it in live action. So yeah, I personally enjoyed the movie. I find it to be really fun. I don't consider it to be one of the top 10 films of all time, but I'm not on the hating side. I do agree that there are some flaws, but I wouldn't criticize the film that harshly. But what did you guys think of The Batman? Did you feel like you got overhyped and you were kind of disappointed, or did you agree with what the critics are saying and feel like this film is overrated, or did you actually really like the film and agree with a lot of what the critics are saying who are on the positive side? Put your thoughts down in the comment section below and let's have a conversation about it. And like this video if you agree with what I say, or dislike this video if you disagree with what I say. I don't mind the dislikes. So that is it I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be sure to see you in the next video.